Hello and welcome. Now I'm sure that you have heard the phrase, "There's no school like the old school." In support of that truism, I offer this, my 1999 Specialized Hardrock. I picked this bike up for $35 a few years ago, and I decided to upgrade it, but not necessarily restore it. More on that in a moment. What I ended up with is a Shimano 9-speed cassette, a Shimano Alivio rear derailleur with Alivio trigger shifter, and an Alivio crankset. I also put on a 30-tooth Fomtor narrow-wide chainring. I also added a set of Fooker resin pedals, and I did not invent the name. Up front, I put on a wake stem and somewhat wider handlebars. Now, these came off an old Diamondback Response that I had. They're not as wide as modern bars by any stretch of the imagination, but they are wider than the Stalkers. I'm thinking 690 millimeters maybe. And they've got a bit of a rise, which gives a better riding position from my perspective. And a little bit of an indulgence here, I did install a reissued Selle Italia Turbo saddle. And I know that the Turbo is not necessarily period correct for the late 90s, but I think it looks good, and it is actually pretty darn comfortable. It still has 26-inch wheels. These are Weinmann's, and I've got a set of Schwalbe Black Jack tires on it. All in all, this bike turned out pretty well. One thing I did not do was restore the paint job on it. I thought about it for a while, but there's this paradigm, if you will, amongst classic car collectors that it's only original once. That is certainly true of this bike. This is the stock paint job, and the bits of the red that are still in good shape, it's just got this deep ruby metallic that sparkles in the sun so nicely. It also has more than its fair share of scratches and paint chips and little bits of rust, but I decided to leave those in place. Let me tell you why. Aside from being original, every little flaw, and I use that word guardedly, every little flaw in the paint tells a piece of this bike's history and story. And in some respects, that's not a lot different than all the scars that I've accumulated, both externally and internally over the years. Every little thing tells part of my story, just as every little thing tells part of this bike's story. Rather than restoring the paint, I just clear coated it and left it the way it was. And I think it gives the bike some character too. You know, this bike's saying, hey, look at me. I've been around the block a few times. I've wiped out a few times. And I'm still here. I like that. And so I took the bike out for a ride a couple of days ago, just on a whim, because it had been a while since I've ridden this bike. Oh my gosh, I forgot what a lot of fun it is. But at the same time, it is a lot of work. I mean, with no suspension, basically my arms and legs become the suspension. And at the end of that ride, let me tell you, I was tired and sore. I knew I had had a good workout when it was all done. And I wouldn't trade it. Seriously, it was just a hoot and a half. Now, I will admit, some of the rootier sections, it was bouncy. Let's put it that way. It was bouncy in the extreme. And it's a good thing my fillings are in decent shape, or they might have gotten rattled loose. Oh my gosh, I kid a little bit about the ride quality, but it was fun. It really was. And I also like the idea that by upgrading and retrofitting this bike, essentially I kept it out of a landfill. I think there's a lot to be said for that too, you know? It's just so easy these days to get into a throwaway mindset. For example, televisions. When I was a kid, televisions were built in such a way that they could be serviced and repaired. I've thrown away a couple of flat screen TVs because they went belly up on me.
Holy crap, that's a lot of work.
And there was no way to fix them. At least no practical and cost-effective way, because the price of a new TV is, well, frankly, pretty darn cheap, all things considered. And I think bicycles might be an exception to that throwaway mentality, because so much of a bike can be replaced or upgraded as necessary. I mean, as long as you have a basically good frame, you are in actually pretty good shape as far as being able to continue using this bike, or any bike, really. I've fixed up a couple of other old ones. I've got the Gary Fisher, I believe it's a 95, but it's a little hard to tell. I turned that into a drop bar gravel bike. And I still have my original mountain bike that I bought new back in 1994. It's an LL Bean Approach. Obviously rigid, 26er. And a few years ago, I did actually restore and repaint that bike because that 90s coral and turquoise graphics, well, let's just say that was dated and leave it at that. I do enjoy working on bikes, which was half the fun of this hard rock for me. And in fact, at the end of the video, I will link to a playlist that includes the complete teardown and build-up of this bike back when I got it. I started out with a pair of vintage Ritchie wheels, but they had 7-speed hubs, and I wanted to upgrade to the 9-speed, which is why I went with the Weinman wheels. Be that as it may, my overarching point, I think, is that this is a fun bike. I enjoyed the ride, and I enjoyed the net result of this upgrade and retrofit. As promised, there is a link lower left to the playlist for the hard rock, which includes that initial rebuild. There's also a link to another video lower right that I think you will probably enjoy. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate that. Goodbye and have a wonderful day.